I think the number one thing you have to do, if you're going to push the system hard enough to actually find the constraints of the system, then you need to do that within a trusting environment. Hello and welcome to the Leadership Launchpad. My name is Matt Gjertsen, the host of this show and the founder of Built, where our mission is to train the next generation of hard tech leaders how to build teams capable of solving the world's hardest problems. I am doing a solo episode today because I think I have figured it out. I always get asked, what makes SpaceX different? What makes it such an outlier? And there are two qualities that have come into clear focus for me over the past week or so. So I really wanted to share them with you. As always, if this is your first time listening to the show, please make sure to subscribe so you never miss a future episode. And if you are already subscribed, please, I humbly ask you to share the show with at least one other person, because that, after all, is how we grow. And so with that, let's get into the discussion. Okay, so like I said, people always ask me, what makes SpaceX different? And it's not just SpaceX. But clearly in the world, there are companies that are thriving in all the change that we see, and there are companies that are struggling, organizations. And I think if we can identify some of the differences between these groups, it can do a lot for you as a leader of any team of, okay, how do I help my team succeed through all of this change? And I'll tell you what brought this into kind of clear focus for me. And it was listening to Jared Isaacman's changes to the Artemis program, and then listening to another podcast, the Off Nominal podcast, where they were talking about those changes. And there was a particular way they framed it that I really, really liked. So first, let's talk about Artemis. In case you don't know, I don't know how you wouldn't know, but if you don't know, Artemis is the current NASA program to take astronauts back to the moon for the first time in over 50 years. Artemis 1 was launched 3 years ago. Artemis 2, as I'm taping this, is getting ready to launch. I'm not sure, by the time this releases, it might have already launched. I don't think so. And so that's the program, right? We're launching this giant SLS rocket. And one of the big problems with the program has been this pace of launches, right? Like I said, the first launch was over 3 years ago. In fact, it's been 8 years since the Artemis program was first announced. There's been exactly one uncrewed launch since then. Ironically enough, the period of time from when John F. Kennedy announced we were going to the moon and the time we landed on the moon was also just over 8 years. And in that time, we launched 40 missions that were a mix of crewed and uncrewed launches. So clearly we're operating at different timetables, and it's a big problem. And Jared Isaacman is the new head of NASA, and that's one of the things that he wanted to change. He's trying to change from a launch every 3 years cadence to a launch every 11 months cadence, which is really great. It's fantastic. I don't know. A lot of people are skeptical. I really hope it works out. But regardless of whether or not it works out, the way this was framed on the Off Nominal podcast is basically everyone has said, hey, we can do this. We can move faster. We can do this. Nobody's said they're the constraint. And so Isaacman has kind of come in and said, okay, if none of you are the constraint, then let's go faster. And he's going to kind of push the team to go faster to see what the constraint is. And that's when this kind of all collapsed into focus for me, of really understanding, what makes SpaceX and these other organizations that are pushing the bounds, what makes them different? And there's like I said in the introduction, there's two main qualities that I want to talk about. First, you have to be willing to push people hard enough so that they will fail. Second, when they fail, you have to give the resources to fix it. That might sound fairly obvious, but let's dig in here. Pushing people hard enough that they might fail, or that they do fail. I've talked in previous videos on my YouTube channel about this idea of the theory of constraint. The theory of constraint, it comes from the manufacturing world, where the idea is that if you're making a product, then there's a manufacturing line for that product. And there's all these steps that happen. There might be dozens or hundreds or thousands of steps where you bend a piece of metal, put a part together, weld a thing, all that stuff. All those are steps. And in that whole system, according to the theory of constraints, there's exactly, at any given time, there's exactly one process that is the constraint of the entire system. And your job as a manufacturing leader is to find that constraint and fix it. And that raises the productivity or the capability of the entire team. And then something else is the constraint. You fix that. And when I talk about this, the thing that comes to mind is the movie Ford v Ferrari, which is a movie about Ford's attempt to kind of improve their brand by challenging Ferrari in the race, the 24 hours at Le Mans, where you basically race for 24 hours and see who can go the farthest. And there's all these great scenes in the movie where they're trying to build this new car. And, first they're going faster and faster. And first the shape of the car is wrong and it's not letting the air get through. And then some oil line fails and sprays oil everywhere. And then the brakes fail, right? But the idea is that if they weren't pushing the car to the limits, then they would never know what the constraint is, and thus they would never know what to fix. So if you think about a team of people or an organization, if you're doing things where everybody feels comfortable, you don't actually know what the constraint is. You don't actually know what's holding back the whole system. And so you have to be willing to push the team hard enough that you will actually find the constraint. That seems pretty logical, but it's honestly not done in most organizations. And there's various reasons that it's not done. I mean, people don't want to be pushed to failure. They don't want to be pushed as hard as they possibly can. They don't want to admit that they can't do things wrong. And so you're going to get a lot of pushback when you're trying to push people that hard. And so I think, every leader is going to have their different ways of creating a system, creating a culture that allows for that failure to happen. I think there's probably a reason why people like Elon Musk and a lot of other founders, are generally seen as somebody who aren't in touch with their or others' emotions as much, because they just kind of tend to. It's not that they don't. Not caring is the wrong word, but they're unfazed by other people's emotional pushback, right? And so it makes it easier for them to say no, go, and really push people harder. But there's lots of ways to do this. You don't have to be blind to the emotional challenges that other people are having. In my world, when I talk about this is why I always talk about trust. I think the number one thing you have to do, if you're going to push the system hard enough to actually find the constraints of the system, then you need to do that within a trusting environment. When I talk to other facilitators like myself who facilitate, workshops, there's often this push of like, oh, you need to make everybody feel comfortable in the room. And I say, no. It's not about making people feel comfortable. It's about making them comfortable being uncomfortable, right? If you think about in the fitness world, this is easy to understand, right? You don't get fitter unless you're sweating, unless you're hurting. The idea of building muscles means you are physically actually breaking down the muscle fibers, and it's the rebuilding of those fibers that's how you get stronger. So what's true in muscles, what's true in physical fitness is going to be true everywhere else for us, right? If we want to get better, we need to be able to break down. And the best way to create a space where you feel comfortable breaking down is by building trust with your team. And so that's why it always has to start with trust. I'll bring in the story of Alan Mulally here and Ford. When he came in as the CEO of Ford in 2006, this is again a story that I talk about a lot. The company was about to lose $17 billion, and yet all the executives said everything was fine. Right? All the projects were green lights. We're all doing good. And the first thing he had to do was build up trust on the team so that they felt comfortable saying, hey, I actually have a problem. So creating an environment where you are able to push the system to the point of failure is the first thing that you need if you want to be able to really innovate and push things far. That's unique enough, but there's a second element that I think is maybe more unique. And that is that once you find that constraint, once you find the point of failure, you need to rally all the resources to solving that constraint. Because again, we go back to the theory of constraint, which says that at any time there's one thing that's holding everything back. If you fix that, everything gets better. And so if you push the team to failure, find that that's the thing that's holding us all back, you need to devote everything to it. And that's one thing that I think Elon in particular, or founder mode that we talk about, is really great at. Because and this is, when Mark Andreessen talks about watching Elon work, basically all he does is he's constantly getting briefings on like during this week, what is the thing holding the company back? Okay, let me come into that team, bring the resources, the credibility, the authority of the CEO to that team. And that's how we're going to fix it. Right. And then all of a sudden, magical things happen when the right person is in the room. If anybody's ever been in the military, you've been in any large hierarchy, you will know this, right? When I was in the military, I always said, if you can get to the colonel or if you can get to the general, everything is possible. The challenge is getting through their administrative staff so that you can actually present your idea to the general. That everything's impossible to the person in front of the general, but everything's possible to the general. And so it's the same thing in the corporate world, whether it's the director, the CEO, whatever it is. Every problem in the company can, whatever the dollar figure is or whatever, or just a decision, it's easy for the right person. But one rung below that person, it's impossible. If I need a $25,000 spend and the company limit for the director is $20,000, that is an impossible amount of money for that director to approve. Right. But the VP, they have $50,000. And so then, it's easy. You have to convince them, but then it's easy. Same thing with decisions. Decisions is another big one. Who has the authority to say yes or no on this risk? Who has the authority to say we're going to go this direction instead of that direction? Right. And so whether you're the CEO or whatever, basically what this means is that when you find the constraint of the system, you have to disregard hierarchy. That's not important. You go to whatever, because again, we go back to this idea of that is the constraint of the whole system. And so you don't say, you're responsible. The manager of this team says, we broke here, we can't do it. It's like, okay, well, you got to fix it. No, that again goes back to this idea of trust. Right? You're still holding people accountable. There's still other conversations that you want to have of, is this person right for the organization? But you have to differentiate the idea of being the current constraint of the system and being the wrong person in the system, right? Those are two different conversations. And that's it, right? I think it's those two things. When you think about being able to move quickly, when you think about being able to push forward and really succeed and really drive outsized wins, you have to push the team hard enough that you find out not just where the limit is, but why that limit is there. What's the thing that's causing it? And then once you find that thing, rally whatever resources are required to fix that thing. Because once you do, by definition, the limit moves up and then it moves up and then it moves up, right? And so you just keep doing that to keep pushing the team forward. And so, of course, there's all kinds of things. You need to have trust. You need to have transparent communication. There's all these other things that you need to do, but all of them are in service of these two fundamental attributes of really high-performing teams. And so at least my hope is, it seems like that's what's happening within NASA right now with the Artemis program. Jared has said, we're going to push forward. And so I think the next thing that needs to be happening is he needs to be asking these questions and signing POs or canceling contracts. And again, it seems, so much of the Artemis program has been held back by these big programmatic things of, we're going to use this kind of second stage. We're going to this kind of orbit. And again, this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. For the people within NASA that are actually doing this work, changing from I forget what it's called, the next upper stage for the SLS rocket to a new that was way behind schedule and way over budget, changing to a different upper stage for 99.9999% of people within NASA, that's an impossible change. For Jared, it's possible. right? Deciding, most of the architecture of Artemis was all focused on and governed around the orbit of the moon that we were going to, and we were going to that orbit for all kinds of various things. And he got it changed, right? He changed because he changed how he changed the whole architecture of the mission. And and that involved Congress, right? Involved going to actual congressional members and convincing them. Again, a person inside of NASA isn't going to be able to do that, but the administrator can. They can. It's not a wave of his pen, but he can go talk directly to the people and get them on his side and get them to change. So it seems like he's doing these two things. He's not just pushing the team hard enough, pushing NASA hard enough to see where the constraints are, but then once they say that the reason why we can't launch fast enough is because we don't have. We can't change the upper stage. And then the reason why we can't change the upper stage is because we're going to this orbit around the moon. So, okay, I, as the administrator, am going to go solve that. So I have high hopes. I'm really excited. I'm also really excited for what this means for any of you listening to this conversation. I think the lesson that I draw from this is that you have to build trust so that people feel comfortable failing. And then you have to have clear communication around what is causing those failures so that you can come in and fix it. Right? If you can do that in an organization, I really think it is key to succeeding. It's key to moving forward. It's key to creating a truly high-performing team. I hope you found this helpful. I hope I don't do these particular kind of solo episodes a ton anymore, but just with these new changes and these new ideas floating around in my head, I really had to get one out. So I hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to listen next time when we have a lot of amazing guests in the lineup right now. So I hope you're enjoying those as well. And I look forward to seeing you next time on the Leadership Launchpad. Thank you so much for listening in on the conversation. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. If you are a manager yourself and you're looking for more insight onto how to better lead your team, please make sure to check out some of our other amazing episodes. If you are responsible for developing leaders in your organization and you're struggling to make programs that actually change behavior and actually impact the business, please reach out so we can figure out how to make your organization better every day. Drop me a line using matt@bettereverydaystudios.com. I look forward to the conversation.